Welcome everybody to Business Climate Leaders, our all hands meeting in April, open for business. So appreciate you all joining us now. We're going to talk about the current situation, where we're at, where we've been, and where we see ourselves going and how you can help us get there. We just want to start out with a quote I just saw from our friend Greta Thunberg. In a crisis, we change our behavior and adapt to the new circumstances for the greater good of society. So that's why we are here. And with that, I would like to introduce Harold Hedelman.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Randy. I'm a co-founder of Business Climate Leaders. We've been going for about 6 or 7 years, I think, if I count right, or if my memory's right. We're going to talk about the current situation because I know everybody is. And that's going to be interesting because there are some really good talking points for us if we make a comparison between the crisis that we're in with the virus and the crisis that we're in with the climate. I want to introduce two new and wonderful members of our steering committee and of our communications team. I'm going to try and say this correctly. Runog Benji and Mark Menzer. And they're going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do this year and some of the exciting things that we're up to as an introduction. So take it away.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just want to state that, in spite of what's been going on, we have been very active during these times. And since we meet and work remotely all the time, this is no change. We continue to drive the movement forward. Some of what we discuss every week in our meetings is administrative, how we can help you make your time more effective. But a lot of the work goes directly to involving more businesses in advocating for climate change policy. So just a couple of examples. We're preparing to present at upcoming virtual meetings, such as one coming up in Southern California in April, and the big CCL now virtual meeting in June. And we've also been updating and improving our collateral materials, which we'll talk about more. And we've had some recent successes. 4 wineries in New York State's Finger Lakes region signed on to the declaration just this week. And they happen to be in a red congressional district. And so that brings the total number of companies declaring to 645, very significant. And secondly, DSM, which is a Netherlands-based company, but has facilities in 20 US states, has agreed to put their advocacy powers behind BCL. And so we welcome them as well. But certainly one of our most ambitious and exciting activities is developing a comprehensive communications plan. And Renog, who you sit on that committee, you want to tell us more about that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mark. So now you need to listen very carefully. I'm warning you. There will be some strong Scandinavian accent for the next minute. So communication is a very important tool to reach out to new volunteers, to new companies that would like to endorse the act. And having a meaningful and inspiring communication is important. And the communication plan, we're looking at the mechanisms, the channels we have, and the tools, the newsletters, the different tools we have to engage with you guys, but also the companies. That is what we're doing right now. So our message to you right now, you will start to see more activities online in the future. So start following us on Twitter and LinkedIn. There will also be a Facebook page later on. And start to share our stories and tag us on social media, because that will help us reach out to new companies and new volunteers, and more people will know what BCL is all about. Also, if you would like to help out in the communication department, writing blogs or news articles, we would love to talk more to you. And finally, if you have an aunt, a neighbor, or a friend that works for a company, and you think they should become a climate activist, talk to them about us. It's together we can move this forward. And on the slide here, you will see the names and addresses to engage online. And now over to Steve.
Okay.
Steve, you going to take this or Daryl?
Well, I didn't, on the agenda it was Daryl, but I'm happy to talk about it. If we're going to go one by one for performance indicators, I'm happy to do this. So, yeah, so we have we've developed a set of KPIs, key performance indicators, for this year. And we just thought we would briefly go over those with you. The first one, which is kind of core to BCL, is to increase our business advocacy. And we've put some, we're putting some numbers to that by within our different sectors. We're getting inputs from our sector leaders in terms of how many new companies that they believe that they can engage this year and get endorsements from. So we're doing that by small, medium, and large enterprises. And then we're putting a big focus on trade organizations, as we find that our engagement with them, when we make connections with them and develop relationships with them, it automatically means that we're have access to their members. And so it's a highly leveraged way to do that. And we've developed a number of relationships with some very influential trade organizations. So that's the first KPI. I'll turn things over to Daryl.
Yeah, our second objective and KPI is to launch a effective development program
Whoops.
in key states. Oops, I'm sorry, should I repeat that?
Yes, just go ahead. Sorry about that.
Okay, and Randy, can I clarify, is this where you'd like me to talk a little bit about the what that program is, or will I do that when we talk about some of the roles and tasks for BCL members?
I would just do the highline now, and we can get into the details with Rebecca.
Okay. All right. So our second objective is to have a systematic program for getting initial contact and first meetings with medium-sized and large businesses in a set of 7 key states, which include Ohio and Colorado and Louisiana and Kentucky and a few others. I'm leading the effort to develop that program. And for this next quarter, our goal in that program is to have it up and running with 50 volunteers and 5 managers doing research and outreach specifically in the state of Ohio. And later in this program, I'm going to kind of give you a little bit more detail on how that program's going to work.
Thanks, Daryl.
Sure.
Who wants to take this on? You want to keep going, Daryl, or does somebody else want to jump on this? Harold?
Hi there. I was muted there. I was going to answer a question from Stefan Leon about whether Virginia is on the list of the states that Daryl's going to be working on. The answer is no. But are we going to go back to point number 3, Randy?
Sorry, my getting away with me here from me here. Go ahead. Sorry, Harold.
I'll speak to what these 7 states are and why it's those 7 states a little bit later.
Thanks, Daryl. Okay. One of the most important functions for business climate leaders, as well as Citizens Climate Lobby, is communications. So we've really taken a lot of time and careful thought on how to improve our communications channels, the things that we say, the materials that we make available to BCL members, and updating our websites so that we can do better in supporting all the various key performance indicators that everyone else in Business Climate Leaders is working on. We've got some exciting new people working in the communications team. We're working hard on a communications plan. As somebody mentioned, maybe it was Randy earlier, we're reorganizing all of our collateral so it'll be easier for you to find. And then we're going to get a little more religious about getting newsletters out regularly that have useful new material for you. We're thinking about doing some new videos. As you know, we have one for commercial real estate, one for breweries. So that's also on our agenda. And we love feedback from you about how they are useful. The ones that we have are already useful to you. So that's the basic idea. We're going to make communications much more effective and able to support all you. Thanks.
Thanks, Harold. And in terms of our overall resources, both human and financial, we're looking to increase the number of members. Currently, through community, we have about 450 members right now. Looking to extend that and make sure that as many people as possible, are active. Looking to raise $10,000 to support our efforts, be it for collateral or be it for us traveling to different events. We were kindly received $5,000 recently from the National Ski Areas Association, which is very, very supportive of our work. And we're looking to identify some key leaders. Ideally, would love to bring in somebody with some industry expertise into the food and beverage area. Although Runag is a great new addition, who used to work in sustainability at Coca-Cola in Europe, but also on the retail consumer side, and somebody to either co-lead or lead the electricity team that Bruce has been leading so far.
Hey,
So
if I may, just before we go on, I wanted to point out something that was really cool about the $5,000 from the National Ski Area Association. Some of you who've been with us for a while may have heard Geraldine Link, who's their policy director. She was on one of our all hands calls earlier, 2 or 3 months ago, I think. In any case, she called up one day and said, I've got great news. We're going to give you some money. And I just about fell on my chair because no nonprofit, no other trade group has just called up and said, we're going to give you some money. And the reason is we've really helped them figure out things that they can do to get ski areas on board about carbon pricing. And there, I don't know how many, maybe it's 15 ski area resorts that have endorsed the bill, and others have been educated about it, and that's an ongoing process. And it's a great relationship. And I was just blown out of the water when Geraldine called up and said, we want to make a donation to you. So it's a real testament to the work that people have done to support that organization. And it's the kind of work I know everybody's doing everywhere.
Thanks, Harold. So I want to pass it on to Rebecca to talk about ways that you can help and things that you can do. I'm going to unmute you here, Rebecca. Okay, are you able to unmute yourself? There we go.
Okay, thank you. So the way you can see the list is to go to the bclresources.org, which is a new site, which is really at today is a link here. It's just we scroll down a little ways. Here we go. We can see a list of tasks that you can take on. And this is a list, at least beginning with bite-sized tasks. These are for people who wish to contribute to business outreach, but may not have a lot of time. So, going down the list quickly, the first job, there is an organization called the Climate Disclosure Project. Well, now they call themselves CDP. They put out a climate action questionnaire each year to measure company actions and their perceived risks related to climate change. They can be useful. The responses to this can be very useful to look at before going to speak to a company. So we are collecting them, and that's what this job would involve. The second one is part of the process of gathering companies to lobby with is to determine which particular companies might have the greatest impact on a given senator's willingness to take a stand on climate. So this second job involves collecting relevant information. It's on the senators in the 7 key states that Daryl is going to list. It's sort of like being a private eye. It's information which might point the way to selecting companies important to the senator. Item 3 is to identify the companies. Once we have this information, identify the companies that might have the power of persuasion with these senators. So these first three on the list are of interest to me. And so if you're interested or you have questions, you can click on the contact link, and we can talk. Number 4 is to work with Randy to approach breweries and wineries statewide via email. 5 is developing a list of seafood growers, catchers, processors, and distributors in these key states, or maybe even more generally. Job 6 is writing, as Renag has mentioned, newsletters, blogs, and other communications. So for these two, you would contact Randy or Renag. The next one is joining a sector team, and you can click on this link here, or anyway, there are a number of places where you can see the list of sector teams, and if you're interested in joining any of them, you would speak to Steve. And then there's the Biz Ad Project, which Daryl is going to talk about in a minute. And finally, there's starting or joining a Grass Tops outreach team, which you've probably heard about, but I expect you may still have questions, and so you would want to contact Bruce. Or if you want to do something a little bigger, or just want more jobs to choose from, there's a link, these bigger jobs, which you can look at and see that there are several more, which I'm not going to go through at this point because we're short on time. But please take a look at them. And again, they'll have descriptions and the people to contact if you're interested.
Rebecca, maybe you can share this a link to this document in the chat so people can get to it that way.
Sure.
Or maybe there's some other way to do that, but just an idea.
It's a good idea because it's, I'll share the resources page from which you can get to here, but the resources page people should have the link to. So I'll put it there.
Okay, great. Yeah. Well, I'd love to tell everyone here just a little bit more about what we're calling the Biz Ad Project, which is short for Business Advocacy Development Project. And what this is an effort to try and get more companies in these 7 key states, but specifically large companies, we call them enterprise and global companies, companies of 2,500 or more employees. And let me step back. The reason for the development of this program is twofold. One is Danny's team has identified 7 states where there are Republican senators and some Republican congressmen and women who they feel have potential to endorse the innovation debt. So those Republican members of Congress are particularly influenced by large employers in their states. So though we've through all of our other programs do have various efforts to get some of these businesses, we haven't done it in a really systematic way. And though we have go teams in these states who have had reasonable success at getting businesses to get on board, those businesses have been primarily medium and small businesses. So this is an effort to focus on these larger companies. The way that we're going about that is to centralize that effort as opposed to having individual chapters with leaders. We are putting together a program that will include volunteers, not just from those states, which, but also volunteers from chapters around the country. This will give more opportunities to those chapters that have lots of engagement, to those members of those chapters to get involved in something. So the states, by the way, are Utah, Louisiana, Ohio, Colorado, Kentucky, Iowa, and North Carolina. The way I remember that is those letters in the order that I just said them are U lock in, ULOCKIN. So the way this program is going to work is we have a centralized customer relationship management program, like online, that volunteers will have access to, in addition to specific tools like LinkedIn and something called Zoom Info, which will give volunteers access to information, making it easy to get the email addresses and the direct phone numbers for key contacts in these companies. And there are two roles that we've divided up the program into: researchers and outreachers. And researchers will try and make sure we have correct information on companies, identify the right contacts, and personal areas of interest where we can make emotional connections with those contacts. And outreachers will do the kind of polite, persistent outreach of trying to get those contacts to respond and hopefully get a first meeting. And that's the goal of the program: first meetings for our sector teams and in the national office doing outreach. This is a program is asking an ongoing commitment from volunteers. So the commitment is 2 hours a week, and every 5 to 10 volunteers, will have a manager who will provide support and answer questions, but also hold the volunteer accountable for doing a certain amount of research and outreach, hitting milestones. Because it's going to cost a fair amount of money to support each volunteer with these tools, we need to have volunteers who are committed and are making progress. And if someone finds that they don't like doing this or it's not working out for them, we need to kind of quickly move on to another volunteer who can give it a try. So we're not wasting the software licenses that we're getting for this effort. So the timeline for this is we're within just a couple of weeks of having an initial group of 5 or 6 people just testing out all the systems that we've set up and the collateral materials. And once we feel like that's in place, we'll expand the program with the goal of having 50 volunteers with probably 5 to 7 managers sometime in towards the latter half of May. So
Thanks,
that's the
Daryl.
BizAd program, and yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And why don't you
Thanks.
put your email in the chat? So if anybody wants to get involved, email Daryl at daryl@businessclimate.leaders.org.
And I want to add one little,
Okay.
or 2 little points that I think might be helpful for you. In addition to the states being chosen because CCL headquarters thinks the senators and some certain members of Congress are, quote, gettable, they are also important for the bill itself because these representatives or senators are on committees of jurisdiction for the bill, which means we really need their support in order for the bill to make progress as it moves through the legislative spaghetti-making process. Second thing is, some of you may think, wow, I don't know about working on companies anywhere. I mean, I could imagine going to talk to a company in my community and have some face-to-face meetings. And I just want to reassure you that actually almost all our business and discussions with big companies are virtual ones. And we literally live on Zoom with all of those contacts. So it's really not new for us. And we hope we can make it simple for you to work with companies like that, even though they're not in the communities where you live.
Thanks, Harold. let me turn it over to Sarah just to see if anybody does have questions, put them in the chat if you haven't already. If Sarah wants to start with that, and I'm going to pull up here a list of our different resources for you guys to look at.
Hey everyone. If you have questions about anything that we've just talked about, now's the time to put your questions in the chat box. Whether you have questions about volunteer opportunities, communications plan, anything you'd like to share.
Hi, I'm Stephen Leon here in Arlington, Virginia. I'm not sure how much.
Can you speak up, Stephen, a little bit louder?
Yeah, let me see. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So Stephen Leon, I'm actually a business owner. I've spoken with Harold Hellman before. So I'm impartial to CCL and my business endeavors, but I haven't seen anything that I wouldn't support through in CCL. So I'm here in Virginia, so I just thought I'd throw that out there. But I will. I already sent out some information to you guys, so I'll just sit back and wait. I'll send my email signature in there later, so you guys can see kind of what I'm about. It's pretty cool stuff.
Thanks.
No, thank you, Stephen.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Looks like there's a few in there.
So Steffi wrote, will we be contacting the CCL chapters in the states? And I think she's referring to Daryl's project. So make sure that the state coordinators and the chapter leaders in those states know what we're going on. Why don't you take that on, Daryl?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was just writing in the chat box. I have in trying to kind of crawl before we walk, before we run with this project, we're focusing just on the state of Ohio right now. So I have been in contact with the regional leaders in that state and a couple of the active Go team leaders. So yes, we're keeping, we're working together. Kind of the first line of volunteers will come from the state of Ohio. There was a question also in chat about the software tools that we're using, and we are paying kind of a market rate for the CRM tool, but it's an inexpensive one. But the other tools we're getting for free through a business connection that I have.
Thanks, Daryl.
There's another question too about, pardon me, my screen keeps popping. We've got a question about contacting CCL chapters in those states to notify them, or will you be working on things? Okay, that's Steffi Rausch's question.
Daryl just answered that, actually.
Yes, you did. This is from John. I attempted to have any of 20 largest Illinois businesses take a climate position in the fall of 2015. And I tried working through sustainability officer, though sadly cannot claim any success. Any better entry point to influence biz advocacy for these climate environmental issues?
Sure,
Yeah, I was just writing
government
back
affairs
to
people.
to John.
I'm going to answer.
Yeah, maybe government affairs. Let me step back and John, this prompts me to position that the biz ad program that I'm describing is a pilot program. We don't know if this is going to work, and we're going to learn as we go whether there are better entry points than the sustainability officer. I would love to actually connect with you offline to hear what you learned from the attempt that you made. You said with the 20 largest Illinois businesses in 2015. I am hopeful maybe the world has changed a little bit, but also one of the philosophies behind this effort is to take advantage of our numbers. I think that if we look at if we recruit volunteers for this effort from across the country, we may have, access to hundreds of people willing to work on this, and then it becomes a numbers game. If we can do outreach to thousands of companies, and only 1 out of 20, do we make some headway, we could still get a significant number of kind of meetings and get things going. So, but like I said, we'll find out. This is an experiment.
Thanks, Joe.
Well-
Just a quick thing, just to say that we're at the bottom of the hour at 4:30 Pacific time. So just want to thank everybody for being here. If you need to go, then feel free to do so. Otherwise, we'll stick around and answer questions. Thank you.
I want to add a little more for John Porterfield's question. Daryl definitely is focusing on Ohio first, and if the program works, the chances are pretty good that we will roll out to the remaining EU lock-in states after that. But that does not mean that we are not doing as much as we can in other states, in the remaining, however many that is. So in Illinois, for example, which is not one of the lock-in states, we'd be happy to talk with you about what you can continue to do there and how we could help you do that. 2015 is almost light years ago, or a century ago, so things may have changed a lot with those companies in the interim. So not to be forgotten, and just remember, persistence sometimes really pays off. And we're very good at that. That's one of our 3P mantras: politeness, persistence, and patience.
All right, we've got another question from Warren. Will an objective...
Sarah, if I could just add to that, in addition to things have changed in 5 years, you can go back, if you were asking them for an endorsement of carbon fee and dividend, or even the bill, there's a lot of other things that they might be able to say yes to, and you start off, taking those small steps and working your way towards a broader support.
And the other thing I might mention is as well, that was a very hard time for us as well to make connections and get companies to respond. And now we have, as was mentioned, 645 businesses that have endorsed. So you've got a track record that you can share. And we've also found a good deal of success of going through trade associations. And so we have good examples of that. And when you get when you get a developed relationship with a trade association, they can connect you with individual companies. So finding out which trade associations those companies belong to can be another avenue to pursue.
For example, in any state, you're likely to have for example, the Illinois Sustainability Council. That would be membership would be companies in Illinois who have agreed they want to work together on a more sustainable Illinois. So that would be a good place to start, as opposed to going individually to the companies. A lot of times, working with a trade group, you get them to help to have you lead them, show them how to lead from behind. In other words, they can put on an informational webinar or something like that without endorsing anything, but you still have the platform from which to reach out to a lot of members at once. So it can be very efficient in terms of your time.
We've got a few more questions. This again from Warren. Will an objective be for feedback to all BCLers as to why a given company has decided to endorse, or in the case of the ski industry, to contribute to BCL? Harold?
Well, I think we had the all hands call a few months ago with Geraldine Link from the NSAA, and that was one of the things she talked about was, why were ski areas endorsing the bill? It wasn't too hard to imagine that they see their snow disappearing, so they've got a survival motive. Other businesses, there's a lot of reasons. Everywhere from being good climate citizens to seeing that a price on carbon will actually make their business compete better in the marketplace against companies who are tied to fossil fuels.
Another from Warren suggests
Let me
that...
also comment that as part of the BizAd project, there will cheers will be organized into teams of 5 to 10 people, and there will be weekly. Those groups share what's working and what's not working, and then across all the volunteers will gather that information and distribute it.
Someone's written about, this is from Daryl. What is Bill Weil's organization? It's called Climate Voices, I believe. And his basic idea is to mobilize employees in companies to get them to move their companies forward.
He's, by the way,
Great.
I don't know if anybody has signed up for the EarthX virtual seminars that are happening. That's an annual, it's the largest Earth Day event in the world, actually. You can go to EarthX, I think, or earthx.org, and they're offering those for free this year virtually. And Bill is speaking at one of those in another week or two.
Do we have any? Oh, Warren has another.
Great.
Warren
Thanks.
Beaton has a question. Can everybody see that?
Well, the first lead is suggest we consider a multiple contact point strategy, sustainability officers as well as government affairs, for example.
Yeah.
Coordinated effort, of course.
Yeah, I agree. That works well if you can do it.
That's exactly what, yeah, that's exactly what we do.
Mhm.
And then
Warren has a good background, if I recall correctly. In,
Another advantage of, yeah.
Sorry.
Anyway, great suggestion.
I might share one experience on that. I've been working for several years now with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group to develop. We have an initiative to try to get as many of their members as possible to endorse collectively the bill. They've at this point we have agreement, close to agreement, to have them endorse carbon principles and then potentially legislation after that. But we had a meeting this week with their environment committee where we talked with about 20 companies, other companies within SVLG, to talk with them about what the progress that we've made with the dozen or so that we've worked with. And we had one of the companies, which has been a real leader of that group, their sustainability, that one of their top sustainability people walked through all of the things that they've done to develop internal support. And exactly to your point, Warren, she talked about it started with their head of sustainability, but then they brought in their government relations person, they brought in their finance person, they brought in their tax person, and gave them and then we also developed, we had a study done that showed what the impact of our bill would be on these companies. And so having that data was really useful for convincing this variety of people internally that needs to buy in really for a company, for a large company, to fully endorse the bill. So just reinforcing your point that multiple contacts within a company are really important.
Thanks, Steve. I do have one other point to make on that, and that is that there are some times in companies where the sustainability officer certainly has to be contacted. Otherwise, he's got to be part of the team. Otherwise, he may feel offended and not participating. But on the other hand, some sustainability officers are more focused on internal operations, not on strategies to deal with a global problem or the U.S. problem. So covering that base is important, but it may not be anywhere near adequate with some companies.
Yeah.
We've often, I want to
Yeah, I think that's
agree with Warren. We've often found that even worse than that, sustainability people are almost in their own silos in some company where they really don't have the ability to move policy in the way that they should. So thanks, Warren.
And Warren's also added here that we might take a look at the inspiration for their endorsement. Who were their players that made it happen? Some better understanding on the strategies and tactics that have worked.
Yeah, I think a lot of us bang our heads against trying to get things done, and then some succeed, some do not, and sharing the successes that help a lot of us who aren't successful figure out what were the secrets to your success. That's the only point.
Yeah, thanks, Warren. We are working on a webinar in the biofuel space that would involve exactly that, talking to the heads of several organizations that have endorsed the bill, just to answer that question, why did you endorse? And the audience would be a larger group of the companies and employees in that sector, in the biofuels and synthetic biology. So we'll let everybody know about that, and you can watch that then. Hey, I wanted to throw out something about the the connections between the virus and climate change. And two of them have been really made well to me over the last few weeks. And the first is that there's a real price to pay for denial, and the cost of inaction gets worse as you go along. Now, we know that about climate, but you see the same thing exactly analog in the COVID response. The countries that are having the worst problem in the developed world are countries that waited. The United States leads the pack on that. So we had denialism, we waited, and now we have, you know, the most cases that we know about, and really leading in the deaths as well. It's really sad. Other countries that have the same problem, Sweden and the UK, and they all waited too long. For some reason, they didn't listen to the science. So there's a direct analog to what we saw with climate. And the second thing that you might think of if you're talking to businesses about this is it's the most vulnerable who are going to get hurt the worst in both cases. And we're seeing that again, the numbers in the United States about who's dying the most, it turns out to be, you know, the most vulnerable. So it's here we have it played out for us in speeded up time.
Thank you, Harold. Any other questions that anybody has that would like to make before we head off for the evening? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you being here. Appreciate all that you're doing with within CCL and BCL, and wish you a very safe, healthy, and enjoyable evening. All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Warren.